all of this decentralization in economics is enabling new regions to a category of workers that could not work in those regions previously. And this is coinciding with rising demand to live more healthy, natural lifestyles. There's these 20 million Americans who want to relocate to the heartland. The traditional heartland, family values, Bible Belt culture that they have is actually a feature, not a bug.
People who are listening to this, what can they do if they're interested in learning more? What should they do?
Yeah, so RidgeRunnerUSA.com. We have some properties for sale on there right now, and we still do have a wait list, and it's growing every day. And we've got these very big offerings coming over the next couple of months.
Josh, good to have you back on the pod.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
So it's been 12 months, 13 months since we had you last with the Highland Rim project. For people maybe who haven't heard the first episode, what is the project? And then what has happened in the last 13 months?
So the Highland Rim project is charting a new course in the Highland Rim region. For those who don't know it, this is a region in Middle Tennessee that surrounds Nashville. Nashville sits in what's called the Nashville Basin. It's mainly a low-lying limestone area. And the Highland Rim sits about 400 feet above Nashville and surrounds Nashville. So Nashville's in a bowl, and it's surrounded by these ridge tops. That's the Highland Rim region. It's defined by dramatic river valleys, most notably the Cumberland River and a lot of its tributaries. And that region runs all the way from Middle Tennessee actually up into Kentucky a fair bit. And this is a beautiful, very under the radar region. I think a lot of people know about Tennessee's hot growth over the last 5 years. That's certainly continuing. But the Highland Rim it's been a quieter area, but it's a world-class area. It's just drop dead gorgeous. And really we are leveraging emerging market dynamics in real estate to, we hope, leave a lasting legacy in what we think is one of the prettiest regions of the country that's very underappreciated right now. But those dynamics really relate to what I'd call broadly a decentralized economy. The fact that, of course, there's remote work, and we all know about that, but there's also just much more decentralized, broader economic activity occurring. Like in Tennessee, for example, Elon Musk and his AI companies are planting facilities in lots of rural areas, and this is bringing new workers, and it's bringing a mix of workers, both blue collar but also white collar knowledge economy workers. So all of this decentralization in economics is enabling, it's opening up new regions to a category of workers that could not work in those regions previously. And this is coinciding with rising demand to live more healthy, natural lifestyles. You really saw this pick up after COVID with the explosion of the farmsteading influencers on Instagram and YouTube shows. And really, we have a lot of customers like this who, have lived most of their life in the cities or suburbs, and they dream of a healthier, more natural way of life. Maybe they have a small little hobby farm. So when they're not working for Google or some other major employer, they can step outside and touch grass and, milk a cow or do something that connects them to the physical world, do it in a beautiful area. And all of that sort of combined with the final factor, which is the big sort. I've written about this a lot, but there's huge categories of workers who have lived in very deep blue states and cities, who increasingly are flocking to red states like Tennessee, Kentucky, others, Idaho, Texas, in large part for political and cultural reasons. Pew always studies who is moving and why they're moving. And for the first time in the last couple of years, political and cultural factors have started to show up in the top 5 reasons why people move. And this is bringing like significant political transformation both ways. But in a state like Tennessee, it's actually getting more conservative. And the funny thing that's happening is it's upending conventional wisdom in these areas. For the longest time, if you were sort of a sleepy working class town and you wanted to get economic revitalization, the conventional wisdom was go, basically market yourself as not being backwards, try to detach a little bit from your very traditional culture and reach out to cosmopolitan urban people and let them know that your city is like safe and welcoming for them. And that was the playbook. And it's been repeated ad nauseum across the country in the Pacific Northwest and Asheville, North Carolina. But really what I think a lot of small towns are seeing right now, and this is very much the case, but the traditional heartland, family values, Bible Belt culture that they have is actually a feature, not a bug. Like that is actually attractive to tens of millions of Americans who want to relocate. And now because of economic decentralization, they can relocate. And they're actually very specifically looking for communities with more traditional values. And so the Highland Rim Project is leveraging all of these dynamics to basically plant a flag and say this is a really beautiful area. You should consider coming here. And it's a big area. There's room for a lot of people without overburdening or making the place feel crowded. A lot of the areas where we operate are 30% below their World War II population peaks. And so there's a lot of land where people can move out there without overwhelming these smaller rural communities, and they can come to a great culture, a great community that already exists, and then plug in, assimilate, and enjoy all the wonderful things these places have to offer. But they're also coming together so they can start new businesses, new cultural institutions. And so we are aspiring to be the leading real estate developer capturing these dynamics in a multi-county region that straddles both Tennessee and Kentucky.
So last time we had you on, I think we recorded that right ahead of the announcement, and we didn't even mention the region because we wanted to keep it under wraps.
Yeah.
What has happened on the ground since, in the last 13 months? For one, you moved from here to the region.
Yeah. So when I spoke with you, we already had some locations penciled in that we were thinking about doing, and it was very nascent. And just that podcast, by the way, that got me in a lot of trouble. So
that's why Josh didn't.
We got whacked by the Guardian right after that, and then we got so much lead generation. It's probably $200,000 worth of free advertising. So thank you. Maybe that'll happen again. That would be nice. But really what's happened since then is we've made a bunch of acquisitions. We held we're a real estate fund, so we held our closing, and we've made a bunch of purchases. We have a lot more purchases under contract right now that will be forthcoming in the next couple of months. These are going to be really big. We've bought raw land, we've bought an office building, we've bought some residential holdings, and people have been moving to Tennessee, to the areas where we operate, buying some from us or just buying off of the open market. So as of today, there are 40 households in the target region who have bought or moved there as a result of our efforts. Still very early days. Our first real public sales are going to be hitting the airwaves very shortly after the time of recording of this podcast. So we've got sort of critical mass, and we've got early adopters who've already bought into the project. And that's really before we have much to market publicly. So we've got a small farm coming online, really a hobby farm development right after this show drops. And then in early April, we'll have really the best project we've done so far will be coming on the market. This is the prettiest farm in Jackson County, which we actually just bought a couple of weeks ago. And it's got everything that you could like about this area. I told you before about the Nashville Basin and the rim that surrounds it, the Highland Rim. So this farm has basically a valley that's about 80 acres of lush grassland, and it's framed by tall, dry, oaky ridges. And then it's got a beautiful creek, Jennings Creek, that runs right through the middle, which most years has water in it year round. Just a gorgeous creek. It's got caves on it. Actually, these are very famous caves. So the Tennessee Tech, which is about 30 minutes away, trains all of its spelunking teams in these caves.
Oh, nice.
And there's two of them. And so I'm actually, maybe your listeners will have ideas for me, but I'm trying to figure out what to do with these caves. I've heard some people have said a cheese making operation. Somebody else said like a speakeasy. Somebody else said an Airbnb. Like cave Airbnbs apparently are big business right now.
Actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's some challenges to it, but I don't know what to do with it. So I'm taking ideas on that. But basically, that we want to do an agri-hood there, and so call it. We're still finalizing our design, but let's say we have something like 40 building sites somewhere around there, and then we have. Then we'll have a part that stays in farmland, that centralized working farm. Ideal would be that people who buy in can get a significant portion of their household's protein off of that working farm that's in their front yard. A lot of the people that we sell to, they want proximity to farming. They like it. They would like having a view of bucolic farmland out their front door, but they also don't want to be, anchored down and having to milk the cows every morning, because that's a serious work. And so we're hoping that we can design a neighborhood that sort of gives people proximity to, traditional agricultural practices, proximity to really good, healthy produce and products, but also kind of fits with the demands and needs of their lifestyle, which, often require travel and other things. The other thing I like about this Brewington Farm project is it really, in one project, it kind of captures a lot of our philosophy and what we're about. So we've already agreed to sell a parcel to a church. They're going to be building an architected, significant, regionally authentic church building adjacent to the neighborhood that's going to be a visual centerpiece. And so this is one of the, a lot of our customers want that. They want, even if they don't attend there, probably most of them won't, but they want the aesthetics of having a really pretty church right down the street. And if you've been in this part of the country, these hills and valleys, they kind of call out for nice decorative buildings, and a church is perfect for that. With a steeple, something that you can see from some distance, maybe there will be church bells. But this is the kind of community that our customers want, and so we're very excited about that. So we've got the church as part of it. And then we've got one of the other things that we really try to do is to defend like the best of traditional land use to the extent possible. And so by finding a way to do something like an agri-hood, we can basically prevent, frankly, developable land from being carved up like a pizza and built with spec homes. We can help play defense against bad development. By doing this and make use of, build and put your building sites in low impact areas that don't impact the sight lines and the naturally beautiful aesthetics of an area. So I'm really excited about this farm. It's called Brewington Farms because it tells in one property so much of the story of what we're trying to accomplish.
Something that you've touched on a few times here is the importance of building kind of in line or with the grain of the area.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit more about that? I think that's, for me at least, this was something that was always, especially when we visited, you can't just airdrop a house, or you could, and it would look out of place, right? That's probably what just a generic developer would do, is treat this like any other parcel of land anywhere in the country, airdrop a, regular looking home or building, and something that's always been inspiring about this project, how you've kind of framed it from the early stages, was there's a texture, there's almost like an aesthetic to a heritage to the region, that you want to preserve even as you build something new in the area.
Yeah. So something that so many, like millions of Americans are looking for, is to have a sense of knowing where they come from, feeling like they come from somewhere particular. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I have from like suburban Phoenix, Arizona, or Dallas, or, Silicon Valley, and they feel rootless. They feel like they don't have like some particular place that they belong to, because so much of the major American cities are very homogenized culturally. So when a customer comes out here, I've had this comment many times. Wow, this feels like the small town America I grew up watching on TV or in a movie or something, mm-hmm. right? It feels distinct. There's distinct regional accents. There's distinct regional architecture. There's distinct regional ways of doing agriculture. And all of that, I think is incredibly important that it be preserved. And this is so that plays into the way like my company operates. Like when we do architectural controls in any neighborhood, we're gonna we're not allowing like modern style homes, right? I actually like some modern homes. Some people, some right-wing people don't like modern architecture. Like some of it's interesting and cool, but it wouldn't be the right choice for most of this region. We want to perpetuate, honor, elevate the best aspects of like Appalachian culture. Like there's archetypes like the farmhouse, right? Mm-hmm. And what are ways that you can iterate on that if you want to do something a little bit upscale, for certain buyers? How can you maintain the farmhouse feel but deliver something upscale? We're interested in solving that problem, but really building something that coheres with what's already there and really celebrates the very best of it. It's good business, what our customers want, and I think that's just what I think a lot of us want. We want to feel like we live and we're connected to a community that's meaningfully different than anywhere else in the world. Like we have the best version of X, Y, or Z. You got to come here to get it. There's nowhere else in the world that you could get this exact feel and aesthetic that's thoughtfully integrated throughout everything in the community. So yeah,
that struck us very distinctly when we visited. This is not like just a gastro pub like where you could walk in, you could be anywhere.
Right.
In that region, you're like, wow, this is like very specific, tangible space. And you might like it, you might not like it, but it's very distinct. It's not just the globalized, homogenous environment.
Right. Yeah, and like this ties back into a comment I made earlier about the conventional wisdom about like which way do you go? You're a small town, you want to grow. And the old playbook, like even if you didn't really intend for it to happen this way, it would result in your small town being like very homogenized, losing a lot of your particularities. Because you look at like Asheville, North Carolina, right, or these sorts of towns. What they end up doing is they end up marketing themselves to tourists from urban areas, or people who want to buy weekend homes. And I get some of that, and that's fine, but you've got to balance that against people who are making long-term decisions to put down roots in an area. And like, if you get that balance out of whack, you're going to end up with a tourist town or something like it. And a tourist town terraforms, the existing culture. Like people who come if you have tourists coming, you don't want them to experience culture shock. You want the community to look a little bit and feel a little bit more like where they're coming from. And and they come with service industries and such that just really can rapidly transform the character of small communities. Whereas I think what's on the table now is like something that's actually much more incremental, with roughly 20 million Americans wanting to move to rural areas right now. If you spread those 20 million Americans across kind of a random sampling of like little heartland towns, they're not going to overwhelm any one town, right? They're going to bring certain things and resources that town didn't have before, but they're going to be in many cases they're people who want to put down roots there. They're going to be assimilating as much as they can, and then then their participation in the resources that they bring will help elevate these towns in a much more organic way than the tourist path. And, we've seen this play out like in very stark terms, even in Middle Tennessee. I don't know if you guys follow this, but there's a little town called Cookeville, Tennessee, about 30,000 people, but it's a regional hub. So people come from the surrounding areas to shop and that sort of thing. 75% Trump voters in that town, run by Baptist churches and that sort of thing. But they recently had to cancel their Christmas parade as a result of like leftist agitators. Essentially, a bunch of LGBT groups wanted to get very aggressive floats in the parade to promote their lifestyle. There was a big clash with city council about this, and ultimately the city canceled the parade. And they did so. They made a number of errors in judgment along the way. One of them was actually putting like an LGBT activist on the planning commission for the parade. But what that shows is like this is a very live issue in a lot of small towns around the country, which is that a lot of these towns, like don't yet fully realize that there's actually a huge market out there for political leaders and community leaders who basically just say, like, no, like, that's not our culture. We're a Bible Belt traditional town, and we're going to stick up for that. And we're not ashamed of it. We're proud of it. And, Cookeville, I think there'll be some political fallout from the flare up down there. But that's just one anecdote of a story playing out many times across the country right now. And I think that, there are, on the other hand, there's some towns that are at the vanguard of this and they recognize it, and they're seeing the right kind of growth right now because they are like defending their way of life and actually celebrating it. They're not ashamed of it. And that actually is attractive. So like in Tennessee, the star has been Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs. During COVID, he's Kane, the pro wrestler, but during COVID, he was very aggressive about defending the liberties of the people in his county. And because of, I think, largely that, Knox County has been the fastest growing county in Tennessee for the last 5 years. And I think there's similar examples in every state. But this is perpetuating the aesthetics and the cultural vibe. That's integrally linked to like tapping into the right kind of growth. People who want to put down long-term roots and assimilate and plug into an area rather than tourists and sort of cosmopolitan visitors.
Right. So you guys have gotten hit pieces from national media, from some Nashville media. How has that affected the project?
Well, it's probably generated, hundreds of thousands of dollars in free marketing. So that's pretty funny. Yeah, we got profiled in The Guardian in January of 24, right after we did a show together. That generated a ton. We ended up getting on Drudge Report and Zero Hedge, and it was great because it generated a lot of friendly and negative attention, and it just became this huge battle that was far bigger than us. And we were just sitting back getting leads the whole time, making sales. So we made Jason Wilson Employee of the Month in January 24. That's the journalist. Some of you know him. And then, in the fall of this year, we had a nightly news reporter out of Nashville come out and I knew he was kind of kicking around, but he came out with like his big, TV cruise, and like he flew like the News Channel 5 helicopter over my family's like personal land. And he like lapped it like 3 times. And he said, it's unclear what they're planning to do on this property. That's what he said in his report. And that kind of cracked me up. I was like, well, my secret plans include hiking with my kids and like maybe like watching beavers play in the lake and like, shooting a deer, but yeah, so that was, but the silly thing, I don't like, hits are good for business, I really like, I generally welcome it. I didn't like that one just because, when you live in a small town and like TV cameras come out, like it disrupts people's lives, and it's just like a disruptive thing. Like I love fighting the media, do it every day very happily, but a lot of people don't like that, so, I think like, but on the whole, there's been a lot of positive press too. I've gotten a chance to talk about the project on some very big platforms. We were profiled in the New York Times in a very fair piece. Ruth Graham is the religion reporter there, and she's actually, pretty fair reporter who lets their subjects speak in their own words. And so she's profiled it. There's ongoing interest. I was just had CNN try to contact me before this started. I don't know if I'll talk to them or not. I probably reject more interview requests than I take, just because I don't really care, but sometimes I just have a concern for I don't want to keep stirring things up and invite journalists out to a local community and that sort of thing. But it's fun. It's like a superpower when you're in an anti-fragile position. It's really nothing. Journalists can't hurt me. Like it's almost always a good day when they write a story about what we're doing. Since you actually broke ground, started buying properties and some of these things. Yeah. Any things that surprised you, lessons learned,
you could went with a vision, anything unique or interesting that came in the process of building this company, at least in its early stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that the demand has really surprised me, and the type of demand. Like I knew it was out there, but seeing it come to fruition, and it's just the variety of people, and maybe this is a microcosm of like, internet dynamics too, right? But like when you have two anonymous accounts that might be best friends, and on Twitter, one of them might be like a mechanic, and the other one's like a professor at an Ivy League school or something, right? And they're both posting as anonymous accounts. And like, that's actually, that's what I see in real life, because a lot of the people who come to the project are very conservative. And so there's a wide variety, like socioeconomically. I mean, there's just like, cognitive elites, high performers, there's factory workers and everything in between. And so that's been really, and they all get along, and, they're good neighbors and all of this. I love seeing that. I would say that, I think that like telling the story of this area and showing it to a national audience has been fun. It's an area that I've known well for a long time, and getting a chance to show like basically the nation, like, hey, here's what this is like out here, is incredibly gratifying, and it really resonates with people. So that surprises me. And then I think like, I think the final thing is just like the extent to which this region is still like very, under the radar. Like, so and it's
not that far from Nashville. That's interesting.
No, it's like 80 minutes outside of Nashville. So like, yeah, I mean,
that was surprising for me too, visiting. I think that just how preserved, I think that's sort of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Especially like maybe just in the West, but you see like windmills up, you see giant houses that have been carved into a hillside and are kind of like just very much sticking out. And then when we went through this part of Tennessee, it was just like everything you would see out of a movie of rural Tennessee.
Yeah, I remember driving with you. We passed some kind of farmhouse with the tobacco leaves drying.
Yeah,
and I think if you woke up from a coma and just looked at that, you wouldn't be able to tell what
am I in the 50s or the 70s or the
in a very meaningful and a cool way.
Right. And that aesthetic can feel really resonates with people, and I think when I moved out there, I didn't appreciate how much like this really is the next, like sort of the next domino in the development chain coming out of Nashville. And it's, it's very true. I mean, there are, I am now sometimes competing with developers who are going to build spec homes on properties that I buy. And, and I think that, but the demand for like alternative style communities is so strong. And I'm actually hoping that like basically a lot of like longtime local developers start copying us, because start copying our methods, because the country and even the areas outside of Nashville are full of story after story of like towns where, like real estate developers saw a quick buck to be made and did something, relatively unimaginative that made them, it was a good business deal, but, at the end it creates maybe a very cheap, unattractive spec home neighborhood that maybe it has decent initial quality, but 10 or 20 years later, those houses will be falling apart. It'll be probably like increasingly crime ridden, and so like, I think that, what's important is like these, I really want to emphasize to these communities and these developers, like, you have a stake in the long-term trajectory of your area. And there's certain things you can do that are like maybe generating a little more income in the short term, but they may be killing the golden goose, because they're going to ruin the character of your town. But if you're like a careful steward of that and you lean into the right kind of marketing and sort of take control of your future, you can have a really good long-term sustainable trajectory of like the right kind of economic growth. Well, a lot of which is going to be like, it's like organic, like, if you find a way to make your community appealing to working families, who have a lot of kids and raise kids who are part of the community and grow up there and want to stay there. That's going to be much healthier for your community longer term, as opposed to trying to compete in the spec home fungible product market, that just goes to the lowest bidder oftentimes. So
it's interesting too that there are still huge swaths of land, 600 acres a piece sometimes, of just beautiful, like in Texas or out west, you can buy a lot of land, but it might just be pretty desolate plains land.
Sure.
Versus like this land is very interesting, beautiful, wooded, rivers, caves, and there's huge chunks, really like pretty far east too, in the general scheme of things, that are available. You've talked about, like, you've thrown around the phrase landed gentry and like that aesthetic. What are you trying to do there?
Right. Well, there's emerging demand for this. I'm hoping that we can kind of come to help define what it looks like. But, more broadly, I would say that people with resources in this country want to live in rural areas, and they want to, and I think the very precise reason why is because when you own a lot of land and live in a rural area, you feel more self-governing. Like if you have 50 acres out in the country, like you basically control those 50 acres. Like you are a little king, so to speak, on those 50 acres. You direct like what it looks like, and you control that domain. And I think a lot of people, especially as technology gets more advanced, and they feel low agency in life, right? They feel like living in the city, that they're that they're not often in spaces that they control. They're in spaces that are controlled by other people, and not even. So it's one thing to be in a space that your friend controls, and it's another thing to be in a space that a corporation across the globe controls. And so people, like, increasingly in the globalized economy, they feel low agency. And so, somebody with resources who moves out to one of these areas, they enjoy many of our areas don't have zoning. So yes, theoretically you could live in a bombed out camper trailer, or, you can build whatever, want to build a castle, you can build a castle, I mean, look, we're like brass tacks. What does this look like? It's like people in the knowledge economy, like buying a 100-acre hauler out in rural Tennessee and building a super nice custom home and driving a beat up old Land Cruiser on the weekends and shooting deer, living a full outdoor lifestyle, but fully connected to the 21st century economy. And then, because of our project, having spaces to socialize with people who are, sort of similar, interested in similar lifestyle, right? So we have a shared, with the office that we bought, we have a shared workspace that, we have like very interesting people just rent part of that and hang out, and they're all remote workers, so they could work at a closet at home, but they, in the hauler, but they get to, they get to drive 10 minutes into the office down country roads, and they get to be at a desk, and then on the desk next to them is a startup founder or an architect or a, Google employee or a consultant, what have you. And so you can just with a couple little amenities, you can kind of create some spaces for people. And that's one of the big, for this, I've said before, there's these 20 million Americans who want to relocate to the heartland. And one of the things that's sort of daunting to them is like, okay, there's certain amenities or certain gathering places that they hope to have that are often not going to exist. And so if you have like you have some shared workspaces, you have some social spaces where these people can meet each other and rub shoulders, like all of a sudden, like your, sleepy little town becomes very competitive. It really stands out even nationally compared to other options. So some of those things are, we've done some of those are, we're trying to orchestrate through partnerships. One of the really exciting things that we're going to be announcing right around the time that this podcast releases is called the Highland Rim Sporting Club. This is land that we have, and we have an operator who's partnering with us to run this club, but it's a country club out in the backwoods. It's built around hunting. So in this region, what you hunt is white-tailed deer and turkey. So those aren't traditionally considered like premier hunting objects, but the experience is premier because you're in the beautiful hills and woods. it's not a curated hunting experience. We're not doing high wire fencing and, and that sort of thing. It's very natural, and you just have to contend with the wilderness. And then when you're done, you can go go drink a nice scotch and, at the fireplace and have a conversation with somebody interesting, from all across the country, gathering. So you're bringing together sort of like this very direct exposure to the height of wilderness, and then bringing in just a little taste of like the height of civilization, and bringing those things together. We'll have like sporting clays, and we've got like a bass fishing lake, and walking trails, and we have access to tons of hunting property because the sporting club can leverage like all the property in the RidgeRunner portfolio to kind of take the members to various properties to hunt. And so the hunting will be very good, but then there's a heavy socialization aspect, and this is it's going to be this Highland Rim Sporting Club is it's going to be very sort of political in nature. It's a men only club. The motto is tradition, fraternity, virtue. So embracing, perpetuating the best of what's in the past, embracing it with a brotherhood, continuing it, and then cultivating together excellence and virtue and passing something on to the next generation. And we hope this becomes, I think that the main reason people will join is to build bonds of friendship with very interesting people from across the country. But we'll also have like a social membership, so people who are local to the area can enjoy the restaurant and go shooting and that sort of thing. But then also people nationally will find it very appealing to have a place that's all their own, out in the middle of nowhere. Where it's just their little corner of the world where they can, socialize with other interesting friends and hopefully shoot some deer as well. So
yeah, that's super cool. I mean, Dallas has something like I was going to say something like that, but not at all like that. In that you can kind of try to design that same experience, but to get to it, literally, to arrive to it and to leave it, you're in the freeway switches and there's concrete everywhere. You're in a city, and even if you were to shoot the skeet and then look above the short trees that they've planted to kind of hide, create the Disney experience that you're somewhere out in the country. You look around, you're smack dab in the middle of concrete.
Right.
Yeah, and
Versus
it's more of a museum.
Yeah, this situation too is like it's not that much different than what Daniel Boone or like the original American Frontier, like they saw something pretty similar to what still exists.
Yes. This is very like uncurated would be my natural. Like the hunting is difficult in this area because you don't have long sight lines like you do out west. You've got lots of hills, and that brush is loud if you walk through it in the winter. So. And you don't have, the trees and the dense vegetation. They make the hunting a challenge. And then with all the hills and valleys, the winds that carry your scent are often unpredictable. You might need to hunt a property, a couple weeks, to really get a sense of when are the deer, where are they, where does the wind tend to blow. So it's a difficult place to hunt. It's a challenge, but in a good way. It's very natural. There's good deer there, but you have to learn it and study it. And yeah, it's very like it's a kind of hunting that you have to contend with. Like it is not that dissimilar from what Daniel Boone would have encountered. But then having that opportunity and then just giving a little taste of refined accommodations and club life at the end of it, all alongside having like an interesting roster of members and interesting lectures. So we'll have some names in our membership that won't be public about them, but names that people would know who, are excited about it. They want to be part of it. And, they may give talks and things like that. So it's that piece is very exciting.
That's awesome. Another aspect, maybe, I know some of these details are still under wraps, but, and you've hinted at it, is bringing, so there's the remote workers, the knowledge workers, but then there's also potential companies, employers who want to move. And they're not in software, they're building, they're manufacturing, they actually have factories. And I think that's an interesting blend. What can you share about that?
Yeah. So far we have 4 companies that have committed, already moved, or are taking steps to open. And it's a very wide spectrum. There's a manufacturing company that bought a site for a factory that will create a significant amount of manufacturing jobs in the area. And then there's some professional services groups and so, yeah, like that's emerging. There's actually a fairly decent existing base of light manufacturing in the area. And then there's a lot of crypto interest in the broader region. So Nashville, of course, is a big crypto hub. And then there's a fair bit of crypto mining actually out in some of the areas in the Highland Rim. There's some parts that have a lot of natural gas wells. And so there's like flare-off generators in that region already. I think early days, but I think we are probably going to be getting a significant Bitcoin presence in all of the areas where we operate. So, I think that like longer term, there's a lot of different ways this can go, but longer term, I think the optimal positioning is having like a critical mass of light manufacturing, then some hard tech startups, where, there's a symbiosis where people can be developing product and building demonstration units all in the same region. So in conversations about that all the time, if people are like interested in that, I'd love to talk to them because, whenever, we try to do whatever we can. Partly I feel like I'm an economic booster, in any area where I operate, where I'm just constantly trying to like bring in business. And there's some things I can do to try to make that easier for people. Because it's good for my business and it's also just good for the area. That's already emerging. And I think within the next couple of months, we'll have more partnerships that we can be announcing publicly about some of these companies that will, I think show that off a little bit. So
what does the roadmap look like for the next 12, 36 months? What do you guys think?
So the next, we have some massive acquisitions coming up, and we have our first really major properties that are going to be hitting the market. And so the next year is going to be a whirlwind of buying and selling property. So this is a year that the vision is going to start to become concrete. There's going to be the people who've bought. Some people are already breaking ground, but a year from now, there's going to be some, beautiful custom homes in the backwoods, and there will be new amenities and new businesses that are on the ground and operating. A lot of the early adopters are already there, but this is the year that we scale very significantly, and so that's really exciting. And I think that's the main roadmap. And we want to, I think I'll leave it there for now.
I'm just curious, do you anticipate the new Trump administration affecting the project? There was talk in the previous admin, and Trump's first admin about freedom cities. Does any of that play into this project?
I'm very interested in that. There are potential ways to collaborate. I'm actually involved with some of the Freedom City stuff. So I'm on the board of Frontier Cities, an org led by Nick Allen, who did Sovereign's House in New York. And they're doing good work. Freedom Cities are generally targeted at states that have a ton of federal land. Like the concept of a Freedom City is that you, really, it was, I think, in large part born out of the experience of California Forever, which was an awesome idea and kind of killed in regulatory purgatory in California. Sure. And so Freedom City lets you circumvent burdensome state regulations. So, in a red state that's also in the East where, most land is privately held, I don't know if the Freedom City will be a major focus. But I do think, one of the things I do want to say though is, like, the East is different than the West because there's so much privately held land. So it's actually a much greater risk of falling to very bad development. And we have a generational opportunity right now as people are relocating and moving to these areas to like guide their development in a way that makes everybody proud, the long-term residents and the people moving there. We, as a company, RidgeRunner, I think we have been blessed with some truly irreplaceable properties, like, some of the prettiest properties in these counties, and they're very pretty counties overall, but like we have some of the very prettiest, and like that's a serious responsibility. And we kind of want to say, don't let these dominoes fall in just like the default developer way that they would have if the markets just took their normal course. So we're going to be very involved in grant writing for all sorts of cultural projects, whether it be helping fund new statues, architecturally significant statues, architecturally significant churches. I would love to see new architecturally significant bridges in that region. You've probably seen some of these West Virginia Appalachian accounts that post pictures of these beautiful 1930s bridges over huge gorges in West Virginia. Like, we need stuff like that. We need to be building again. And I think the Trump administration is committed to some of these projects that are both infrastructure projects, but they're also inspiring and beautiful. So yeah, I hope, I do think there will be some opportunity along those lines. And we're certainly very eager to explore it. At the same time, I'd say like there's renewed interest in conservation, like kind of across the board. With the environmental movement, so much oxygen has been taken out of the discussion by climate change. And climate change is this massive, diffuse responsibility problem that it's very convenient for a corporation. You run a manufacturing facility, and the problem isn't the river that runs right by your facility. The problem is it's just the concentration of carbon in the air that everybody on the planet contributes to. So it's a big intractable problem that you don't have direct responsibility for. So it's easy to understand why corporations love focusing on the climate rather than like much more simple things like adopting a river or putting land in a conservation easement. But we're seeing like emerging interest across the aisle in conserving really beautiful, irreplaceable parts of the country. In the East, a lot of what that means is actually, like in the West, you have the opposite problem because the federal government owns 90% of some states, right? But in the East, a lot of it's going to look like, okay, how can we shepherd market forces and be prudent and preserve some of these really pretty areas if they're going to be growing for the next 50 years.
Yeah, so it's awesome. So I think last year we just had a wait list, and you talked about the had a wait list on the side, and you talked about if people are interested to go there. Fast forward to now, people are listening to this. What can they do if they're interested in learning more? What should they do?
Yeah. So RidgeRunnerUSA.com. We have some properties for sale on there right now, and we still do have a wait list, and it's growing every day. And we've got these very big offerings coming over the next couple of months. One will be coming right around the time of the release of this podcast, one in early April. So continue to go there. And we also email updates, and we occasionally, if we have other maybe small properties that we offer to that wait list, we'll do that there as well. But that's the best way to keep in touch. Of course, we're also very active on Twitter or X. So, check us out there as well. And, come visit. Come, shoot me a DM or an email and come visit. I'm always happy to show people around and show them what we're doing. So
beautiful. And we'll drop all those links in the show notes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So Josh, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much.
Totally.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the New Founding Podcast. New Founding has become a rallying point for founders and investors who are taking serious bets in the face of a stagnant business culture. Our venture fund backs founders building dynamic companies, powered by American ideals and a positive national vision. These are the kinds of founders that embody the optimism and competence of the people who come on this podcast. If you're interested in investing in our fund, check out newfounding.com/venture fund and follow the link to apply.